there are secrets buried beneath the marble vaults of the Imperial Palace, secrets older than the throne itself. Beneath the constant drone of servitors and the whispering pulse of the Astronomicon lies a truth that no Inquisitor dares to name aloud. It is not the Heretics or Xenos that threaten to unmake the Imperium, but something older, quieter, something that was never meant to be known. On the surface of Terra, humanity kneels before a god who has not spoken in 10,000 years. But in the lightless corridors beneath the throne, voices still murmur his name. Some say they are echoes from when the Emperor still breathed. Others believe they are the whispers of something learning to wake. Every custodian, every priest of the Adeptus Mechanicus, every scribe of the Administratum feels the tremor of unease but cannot name its source. The Imperium's heart beats not from faith alone, but from machinery, ritual, and a secret so vast that to comprehend it would burn the mind. This is not a tale of distant crusades or demonic invasion. This is the story of the quiet death that grows in the shadow of gold, the secret that could destroy the Imperium from within. The light on Terra is a cruel thing. It does not illuminate so much as it judges, pouring through the toxic haze and the smog-wreathed heavens like molten glass. It rolls across the adamantine spires of the Imperial Palace, glinting off the flayed faces of statues, striking gold leaf that has long since dulled to the color of dried blood. From orbit, it is glorious, a citadel of faith and eternity. But beneath that surface, below the kilometers of sanctified halls and echoing cathedrals, there is no sun, no sky, and no glory. There is only the hum. The hum is constant. It seeps into bone and thought alike, a low mechanical chorus that never ends. It is the sound of the throne's heartbeat, the rhythm of a god maintained by hands of flesh and metal both. In those depths, time ceases to be measured in hours or shifts, but in machine cycles, the clicking of cogitators, the distant hiss of Prometheum feeds, the murmured Benheric prayers of the adepts who live their entire lives without seeing the light of day. It was in one of these forgotten arteries of the palace that a single servitor failed. Its task had been simple: to monitor a coolant valve regulating a tertiary plasma feed connected to the throne's tertiary conduit array. Millions such tasks occur each moment, and yet this one was different. For when it failed, it did not simply halt, it screamed. Not with words, not even with human sound, but with static. An impossible, keening shriek that rattled through vox cables and made the lumen strips shiver. The alert came to Custodian Livius Corda during the third watch cycle. He was stationed within the Obsidian Transit, one of the upper tunnels connecting the Vigilant Bastion to the lower reliquaries of the Golden Throne. His duty was one of silence, observation, vigilance, and faith. But the sound that came through his helm was not faith. It was pain. At first, he thought it interference, a scrap of corrupted code bleeding through the VoxNet. But the pitch, it rose and fell like breath. And when the Mechanicus adept beside him began to tremble, Corda knew something was wrong. The adept, Magos Lex Mechanic Audris, was a fragile thing of wires and pallid skin, his features lost beneath a web of cables feeding into his skull ports. When the sound hit, his Benheric cant faltered, and the mechadendrites on his spine began to twist as if in agony. "It is impossible," he stammered, his voice split between vox distortion and flesh. "The servitor is located within the maintenance shaft below Section 9. It should not possess the capacity for independent signal creation." Corda's voice was calm, though his gauntleted fingers tightened on the haft of his guardian spear. "Show me." Through the dim flicker of his helm's display, he watched as Audris patched the signal to a nearby hololith. The image resolved into static, and then for an instant, into a shape, a face, or the ghost of one. Not the servitor's face, but something pressed behind it, like a reflection trapped beneath the glass. It vanished almost immediately, leaving behind a pulse of white light and a data stream too complex to be random. The Magos recoiled. "That is not machine code." Korta said nothing. He turned, his boots echoing against the metal floor as he began the descent. The lower vaults of the palace were older than memory. They were the foundations upon which empires had risen and died. The walls bore the scars of the Unification Wars, burn marks, bullet impacts, the half-fused remains of enemy automatons. Even the air felt ancient, as if the dust itself remembered. He passed servitors locked in eternal maintenance, their limbs frozen mid-motion, their eyes dark. Some still whispered fragments of prayers through corroded vox grills, words that had long since lost meaning. As Korta moved deeper, the hum grew louder. It was no longer just the background rhythm of the throne. It was layered, 1,000 different frequencies, some so low they could be felt in the ribs. The deeper he went, the less the air tasted of oil and incense, and the more it began to taste of iron. The maintenance shaft was sealed by a vault door marked with the sigil of the Mechanicus. Its paint was worn, its seals half eroded. Audris followed behind him, muttering canticles of permission. The door opened reluctantly, exhaling a breath of stale heat. Inside, the servitor hung against the wall, half-fused to its station. Tubes pulsed through its body, feeding fluids that steamed against the cold air. Its mouth hung open, leaking a faint thread of sound, the same static scream that had reached them above. But its eyes, they were moving, flickering, almost as if tracking something unseen. Korta approached. He could smell burnt circuitry and the faint, sweet scent of decay. "What function did this unit serve?" he asked. "Regulation of plasma flow through the secondary coolant vein," Audris replied, his voice trembling. "It should not have any vocal module, Custodian. None of them do." Korta leaned closer. The servitor's jaw twitched, the sound shifting, becoming almost rhythmic. He could hear it now, fragments of words buried in the noise, a pattern, a voice. He reached out and placed a gauntlet against its forehead. The metal was warm, almost feverish, and then the servitor spoke. Not in sound, not in any tongue of man or machine, but directly, a whisper through the vox line embedded in Korta's armor. It was faint but unmistakable. A single phrase. "He is dreaming." Korta froze. The phrase repeated once, then again, fading each time like an echo pulled into the distance. The servitor convulsed violently, tearing free of its restraints before collapsing into a tangle of limbs. Its eyes burned white for a heartbeat, and then went dark. Audris fell to his knees, muttering in Binharic desperation. "It cannot be. The data stream. This should not exist within organic cognition. Custodian, I must seal the room," Korta said quietly. He turned toward the dark corridor beyond, the echo of that impossible whisper still alive in his mind. He is dreaming. The throne did not dream. The Emperor did not sleep. And yet, in that moment, Korta felt as though all of Terra had shifted slightly, as if the great machine's heartbeat had missed a single beat. The chamber sealed behind them with a hiss like a dying breath. The lumen strips flickered once, then stabilized, casting the maintenance shaft in a trembling amber light. Korta stood motionless for a long moment, the stillness of his armor contrasting with the quickened rise and fall of his breath within. He could feel the residual pulse of the servitor's signal echoing through his vox link, as though the machine's death had not ended the transmission but sent it deeper, into the walls, into the throne's veins. Audris was still muttering fragments of binary prayer, the mechadendrites on his back twitching in agitated patterns. It is a corruption, a viral data incursion, some remnant of the dark age of technology, perhaps. Silence, Corda said, not harshly, but with the weight of command. The custodian's voice, when filtered through his helm, carried a resonance that silenced all but the most reckless tongues. What was that phrase? The Magos hesitated, optics dilating. The auditory pattern translated through the servitor's decaying vocal arrays was non-standard. Linguistically human, but without machine comprehension tags. I do not... You heard it. Corda stepped closer, towering over the smaller figure. What did it say? Audris lowered his head, metal fingers tightening against his robes. It said that he is dreaming. The words hung in the recycled air like smoke. Neither man moved. In that space, even the ever-present hum of the palace seemed to recede, as though listening. Corda turned his gaze upward, toward the ceiling where veins of cabling and coolant pipes ran like arteries. No signal is allowed to reach the throne unsanctioned. Every transmission is filtered, sanctified, and sealed. If something breached those circuits, it could spread, Audris whispered. The custodian's visor flared with a faint golden light as he activated internal augers. Trace the signal's origin. The Magos obeyed, plugging a data spike into the wall port. His cogitator array hissed with static, the air around him thickening with ozone. It originates below the tertiary maintenance level, he said after a moment, his voice growing faint with disbelief. Far below the throne's surface architecture, beyond the sacred boundary of the Mechanicus domain. That level was sealed after the Reign of Blood, Corda murmured. He remembered the old histories, the wars that had raged even here, in the heart of the Imperium. No servitors were ever authorized to function there. Audris disconnected, abruptly, the light in his optics fluttering. Then, something else is functioning there. Corda turned toward the access shaft. Beyond the reinforced door lay darkness, a darkness that had not known light since before the Imperium's founding. "Prepare your data slate and recording unit," he said. "We are descending." The Magos hesitated. "Custodian, I must protest. There are protocols. Protocols are for those who have the luxury of ignorance," Corda said. "The Emperor's light does not falter, but his mechanisms may. I will not risk that failure through hesitation." They began their descent through the shaft, the walls narrowing around them. The air grew hotter, thicker with metallic dust. Corda's armor scraped against rusted railings that had not been touched in millennia. Occasionally, a lumen flickered to life as if startled awake by their presence, revealing stretches of forgotten machinery, pipes as wide as roadways, conduits that pulsed faintly with internal light, and once the desiccated remains of something vaguely human, fused to a console. Audris paused to scan it, his mechadendrites whirring softly. Pre-heresy Mechanicus design. Organic components integrated with data relays. These constructs were abandoned after the discovery of neural corruption. "Abandoned," Corda repeated, "but not removed." They continued downward until the shaft widened into a chamber. It was circular, lined with cracked marble once inlaid with gold. In its center stood an enormous mechanism, a sphere half buried in the floor, its surface engraved with sigils that glowed faintly red. It pulsed, slowly, like a heart. "This is not Mechanicus technology," Audris said. His voice trembled with reverence and fear alike. "The structure predates even the Dark Age. It may be human design, but of a kind lost to all record." Corda approached the sphere, each footfall echoing in the still air. "It is connected to the throne." "Impossible." Audris whispered. "There are no documented substructures beyond the 9th level. This should not be." The custodian reached out and touched the surface. It was cold, unnaturally so, and yet beneath that chill was something that throbbed faintly, alive. His armor's auspex flickered, registering readings that made no sense. Temperature shifts with no source, radiation without decay, sound waves that looped in impossible rhythms. He felt it again. The whisper. Not in his vox this time, but in his thoughts. A pressure behind the eyes. A word forming where no mouth spoke. He is dreaming. Corda stumbled back, breath catching. His gauntlet tightened around his spear until the servos whined. "You heard it?" Audris's optics flashed erratically. Negative auditory input, but the chamber, it resonates. The machine speaks in frequencies that bypass cognition. Custodian, if this is what I believe it is, we must leave. Explain. It is a subconscious relay, Audris said, words spilling fast now. A mind link, not to communicate data but thought. If the throne itself has begun to generate signals of this kind, it means something within the Emperor's containment system is shifting. The biological core may be fluctuating. You speak as if he were a mere organism, Corda said sharply. I speak as a servant of the machine god, Audris replied, his tone quivering between defiance and awe. And I tell you this, the throne is not what it was. Something beneath its shell lives. Before Corda could respond, the sphere shuddered. A tremor rolled through the chamber, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. The red sigils brightened to gold for a heartbeat, and then dimmed again. The hum that had filled the air grew louder, sharper, almost human in cadence. Audris fell to his knees, clutching his head as Binary screamed from his vox grill. It's transmitting! Corda grabbed him by the shoulder, hauling him upright. To where? The Magos's voice broke into static. Everywhere! And then the lights went out. Only the sphere remained, glowing faintly in the dark, a pulse of gold beneath the sunless sky. The chamber sank into a darkness so absolute that it felt like a substance, heavy and suffocating, pressing against the armor's joints, seeping into the seams of thought. Corda's auto-senses flared, compensating as his helm's systems adjusted to low-light mode. The sphere still pulsed faintly ahead of him, a single ember of gold in an ocean of black, but the pulse was no longer steady. It was erratic, feverish, almost as though it struggled to remain alive. Audris was muttering to himself again, lines of code spilling from his vox like prayers, desperate and malformed. His mechadendrites scraped against the floor, searching for contact with anything familiar, any socket, any relay that might anchor him to the known world. The circuits are responding to psychic interference, he rasped. There is no power failure. The lumen feeds are operational. The darkness is not physical. Corda took a step forward. His armor's weight made no sound. The custodian guard were trained to move as shadows when needed. And in that moment he felt less a warrior and more a pilgrim, trespassing upon a shrine forgotten by the gods. He raised his guardian's spear slightly, not as a threat, but as a light. The weapon responded, the built-in power field glowing faintly blue, casting long skeletal reflections across the sphere's metallic skin. The surface was changing. What had once been smooth was now shifting, plates rearranging themselves with a sound like stone grinding against stone. The sigils on its face began to warp, bending into new configurations that were not human, not binary, not even symmetrically possible. Audris cried out, his optics stuttering violently. Magos, Corda said, his voice steady. Interpret. I cannot, Audris whispered. It is not language, custodian. It is intent. The word struck Korta harder than any weapon. Intent implied will. Will implied consciousness. He felt his mouth go dry behind the Vox grill. Then it is awake. No, the Magos said quickly, almost pleading. Not awake, reacting, reflexive. A system echo, perhaps a feedback loop between the throne's psychic matrix and this substructure. The Emperor's mind, if such can still be called a mind, may be projecting subconsciously through dormant conduits. Then these are his thoughts, Korta said quietly. Audris looked at him, and for a moment his mechanical eyes seemed almost human in their fear, or what remains of them. The hum rose again, now louder than before. It resonated in the bones, in the teeth, in the plates of Korta's armor. It was not sound, it was presence. He felt the pressure of it behind his eyes, the sensation of something vast pressing against the thin membrane of reality itself. He had stood upon battlefields where demons tore open the veil between worlds, had seen entire regiments of the Astra Militarum driven mad by mere echoes of the warp, and yet this felt different. It was not hostile, it was searching. A flicker of light rippled across the sphere, and for an instant Korta saw something within it, not through it, but within, as if gazing through layers of time. Figures moved behind the metal, silhouettes of men kneeling before a throne that burned with invisible fire. He saw the outline of the Emperor, his face obscured by brilliance, and around him the custodians stood in perfect formation. It was a memory, a fragment of the moment the throne was born. And then, in a blink, the image was gone. The sphere fell silent. The hum ceased. The air felt suddenly empty, robbed of purpose. Audris's trembling slowed. "Signal loss," he murmured. "The energy spike has dissipated." Korta did not move. His gaze was still fixed on the now dark sphere. "I saw him," he said softly. "Not as he is now, but as he was." Audris's head turned sharply, the servos in his neck whining. "Custodian, your optics may have suffered interference. The radiation from the psychic flux. I know what I saw." The silence that followed was brittle. Far above them, the distant rumble of machinery hinted that the disturbance had reached other layers of the palace. Somewhere, alarms would be sounding. Adepts would scurry to their cogitators, reporting anomalies to superiors who would suppress them before any record could stain the sanctity of the throne. The Imperium's great strength had always been its ability to bury what it feared most beneath ceremony and obedience. Korta turned away from the sphere. "This stays between us." Audris hesitated. "Custodian, the Omnissiah demands order," Korta interrupted, his voice sharp as a blade. "And so does the Emperor. You will file no report. You will alter no data stream. Whatever this is, it lies outside the reach of both priest and scribe. Do you understand?" The Magos lowered his gaze. Yes. They began the long ascent back toward the upper levels. The climb felt endless, each step accompanied by the faint vibration of machinery struggling to stabilize. Once, Korta paused to glance back down the shaft. For a moment, he thought he saw the sphere still glowing faintly far below, a single pulse like the dying ember of a star. But then it vanished, swallowed again by the dark. When they emerged into the maintenance corridors, the air felt colder. Servitors lined the walls, their eyes blank, their limbs motionless. But as Korta passed, one of them turned its head slightly toward him, an imperceptible movement, almost too small to notice. He stopped. Its Vox grill crackled once, a hiss of static, then a whisper. He is dreaming. Korta drew his weapon in a single motion, the power field flaring to life. But the servitor did not move again. It hung lifeless, a corpse of steel and faith. Audris backed away, his augmetic limbs twitching. "It's spreading." Corda said nothing. He reached out and placed a hand against the wall. It vibrated beneath his touch, faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Somewhere deep below, the sphere pulsed again. The pulse beneath the palace did not fade. It deepened. It became the rhythm by which Terra itself seemed to breathe. Every lumen flicker, every servitor twitch, every half-heard whisper in the vox was drawn into that hidden cadence. For the first time in millennia, the Imperial Palace seemed alive. Corda walked in silence through the long corridor of the reliquary passage, where marble walls had been carved with the victories of the Emperor during the Unification Wars. The gold reliefs gleamed faintly in the failing light, each figure frozen mid-triumph. Yet beneath that artistry, the custodian could feel the rot. The air reeked faintly of burned insulation and sanctified oil, the scent of devotion layered upon decay. Audris followed a few paces behind, his metal limbs whispering over the stone. He had said little since they left the lower shaft, and Corda had not pressed him. There were few words to fit what they had seen. When a man, or what was left of one, touched the machinery of a god and found it stirring, speech became a dangerous thing. As they reached the upper threshold of the maintenance levels, they encountered the first signs of disruption. A group of Mechanicus acolytes had gathered around a broken conduit, their red robes stained with grease. They looked up sharply as Corda passed, their eyes widening behind lenses and augmetic visors. To see a custodian guard in the lower vaults was rare. To see one covered in ash and machine dust, his spear drawn, rarer still. One of the adepts stepped forward. "Lord Custodian, there has been a surge. Data flow inconsistencies throughout the relay hubs. We have detected anomalous psychic feedback in the power lattice. The Magiar..." He hesitated, glancing toward Audris, whose optics burned like twin suns. Conflicted on the cause. "Contain it," Corda said, his voice calm but absolute. "Isolate all channels leading toward the throne's tertiary systems. No transmissions in or out until I command it." The adept bowed so deeply his hood brushed the floor. "By your will, Lord Custodian." They moved on, ascending through the stairwells that twisted like the veins of some immense organism. The sound of distant chanting filtered down from above, the hymns of the Adeptus Custodes on duty near the sanctum, voices like thunder muted through kilometers of stone. Each verse was a fortress, every word an act of war against the creeping entropy that dared to dwell in the Emperor's shadow. Corda paused on a landing overlooking the endless descent they had climbed. The hum still lingered in the air, faint but persistent, as if the world itself refused to return to silence. He felt a tremor of unease, a sensation he had not known since his initiation. For the first time in 10,000 years, the custodian wondered what it meant to be afraid. "Magos," he said quietly, without turning, "if what we witnessed below was the throne speaking, then what we heard, what could it mean?" Audris took a moment before replying. "The phrase may not be literal. The human brain, even one as augmented as yours, interprets psychic feedback through metaphor. He is dreaming could signify a fluctuation in psychic activity, or it could mean exactly what it sounds like, that the Emperor dreams." The Magos hesitated. "If that were true, Custodian, then the Imperium itself is built upon the edge of a precipice. For if he dreams, then he is not dead. And if he is not dead, then perhaps he may wake. What becomes of the galaxy when a god wakes from his nightmare?" Corda turned then, his expression unreadable behind the mask of his helm. "What becomes of us," he said, "is irrelevant. What matters is that the throne remains stable. Even if that stability demands ignorance? Corda's silence was answer enough. When they emerged at last into the light of the higher levels, the air was cooler, purer, but the shadows clung to them like a curse. The golden corridors of the palace stretched out in all directions, lit by sacred braziers burning with perfumed oils. Servitors moved in precise lines, chanting the endless litanies of maintenance. From afar, the palace was perfection. From within, it was a tomb. As they approached the access gate leading toward the inner sanctum, two fellow custodians stepped forward, their armor gleaming like the heart of a star. One raised his hand in greeting, a gesture both solemn and questioning. "Brother Corda," he said through the vox, "you were scheduled for silence duty. What brings you from the vaults?" Corda's response came without hesitation. "Maintenance disruption. Mechanicus oversight failure. Situation contained." The custodian inclined his head. "Shall we alert the tribune?" "No," Corda said, more sharply than intended. "There is no cause for escalation. The throne is secure." A brief pause. "Very well. The Emperor protects." "The Emperor protects," Corda echoed, and passed through the gate. Behind him, Audris walked as though in a dream, his mind clearly spinning with calculations, probabilities, and unholy questions. He clutched his data slate tightly, the screen flickering with static. Within that static, for an instant, words formed. "He is dreaming." Audris turned the device off at once, tucking it beneath his robes. He did not tell Corda. They reached the chamber of the transit elevators, the vast cages that moved between the palace's layers like veins carrying the lifeblood of an empire. Corda entered one without a word. As the gates sealed, he looked once more toward the distant silhouette of the throne's spires. Even through layers of ceramite and adamantium, he could feel it, the faint, living pulse that ran through the palace's bones. When the elevator began its ascent toward the custodian's barracks, the lights within flickered once, and in that brief stutter of illumination, Corda saw his own reflection in the polished metal of the walls. For an instant, it was not his face behind the helm's visor, but another's, eyes like dying suns, a face half shrouded in flame and shadow. The reflection smiled. Then it was gone. Corda stood alone as the lift continued upward, the hum returning, softer now, like a lullaby. He did not move, he did not breathe. The silence around him was complete, yet somewhere deep beneath the palace the pulse continued, slow, patient, unending. And in that rhythm, the custodian could almost hear it, a whisper that was not sound but thought, reverberating through the machinery of the world. He is dreaming. The light above him flickered once more, and then steadied, cold and perfect as before. The lift doors opened. The palace awaited. But the world would never be silent again. If the story of Terra's silent heart stirs something in you, a whisper of curiosity, a tremor of dread, then stay with me. Lend your attention to this chronicle, and together we'll descend through the layers of the Imperium's most sacred lies. Like a vox signal fading through the warp, each truth will come in fragments. If you wish to hear them all, to follow this descent until the final revelation, let your support be known. Like, share, and bind your oath to this channel. The secrets of the Imperium are not easily spoken, and only those who listen survive the telling. The palace above Terra gleamed like a promise, but inside it was a mausoleum made of prayers. Even the air seemed sanctified, filtered and perfumed until the scent of oil and incense clung to the lungs like confession. Every surface reflected light from braziers burning sacred promethium, their smoke coiling upward in thin silver tendrils that vanished into the vaulting dark. Here, the Emperor's image was carved upon every wall, embossed upon every door, staring from every coin of light. Yet the silence was absolute, the kind of silence that made a man question whether he still breathed. Corda walked through that silence like a ghost draped in gold. His armor, the work of artisans dead for millennia, caught the light with every motion, but the brilliance felt heavy now, oppressive. The weight of gold was not measured in metal, but in expectation. To wear it was to become a symbol, not a man. A symbol could not falter, could not doubt, could not dream. And yet, as he crossed the hall of unending vigil, the custodian found himself haunted by the echo of words that should not exist. He is dreaming. The phrase gnawed at the edges of thought, burrowing deeper each time he tried to silence it with prayer. He had recited the catechisms of the 10,000, whispered the litanies of the throne, and still the whisper persisted. Patient, unyielding, intimate. He reached the sanctum of echoes where the light dimmed to near twilight. This chamber, seldom visited except by the custodians themselves, was lined with statues of their fallen, brothers whose names were sung in gold script across the floor. It was said that when the Emperor's light dimmed even slightly, these statues wept oil. Corda had never believed that. But tonight he looked upon their faces and thought he saw moisture glistening beneath the eyes. He knelt, the servos in his armor sighing as the spear's butt struck the marble. The hum of the throne was faint here, distant yet always present, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. He tried to steady his thoughts, to place his faith where it had always belonged, in service, in duty, in the certainty that all things served the Emperor's design. But certainty had begun to feel fragile, like glass underfoot. From behind him came the soft footfalls of another custodian. "Brother Corda," a voice said, smooth as polished brass, "you have been summoned." Corda rose, turning to face Captain Tiberian Solara, a veteran of 10,000 campaigns, his armor marked with the sigils of custodian command. Even among the 10,000, Solara was known for his unbending loyalty, a man whose devotion to the Emperor bordered on the sacred. His helm was off, revealing a face of marble calm and eyes that had forgotten what it meant to blink. "The Tribune requests your presence," Solara said. "There are questions about the disruptions below." Corda's hand tightened on his spear. "I contained them." "So the reports claim," Solara replied, "but the Mechanicus are unsettled. Magos Audris submitted an incomplete data record. The High Lords have been notified of an energy fluctuation near the throne's sublevels. They wish clarification." A flicker of irritation passed through Corda's mind. Audris had sworn to silence, and yet the machine priest had faltered. Perhaps fear had driven him to seek absolution through bureaucracy, or perhaps something deeper had guided his hand. "I will answer," Corda said at last. As they walked toward the Tribune's chamber, the corridors grew narrower, the walls more ornamented. Reliefs of the Emperor's triumphs rose around them, scenes of conquest and unification, of demons crushed beneath a golden boot. Yet Corda found himself drawn to the spaces between those carvings, the cracks where time had eaten into perfection, the hairline fractures that no amount of polish could hide. Even here, decay whispered. Even here, silence was not empty but full of watching eyes. The chamber of the Tribune was lit by golden braziers suspended from the ceiling like suns. At its center stood Tribune Callis Draven, the voice of the custodian guard, robed in cloth of gold and bearing the long staff of the office. His face was ageless, sculpted by gene alchemy to embody the perfection of mankind's guardian order. When he looked at Corda, it felt like being weighed. "Corda," Draven said, his voice quiet but vast, the way a mountain might sound if it spoke. You entered the maintenance levels beneath the throne without authorization. Yes, Lord Tribune, Corda replied. There was an anomaly. A servitor malfunctioned, generating unauthorized Vox output. I sought to prevent contamination. Draven's gaze did not waver. And you succeeded? I did. And yet, Draven continued, there have been echoes. Fluctuations in the Astronomican's harmonics. Minor, but noted. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica reports a tremor in the psychic pattern. They call it noise. The Astronomican is vast, Corda said. It draws upon the Emperor's will and the faith of billions. A tremor is not uncommon. Draven studied him for a long moment. Perhaps, but there are those who believe that the Emperor's will does not tremble. Corda's jaw tightened. The Emperor's will is infinite. The Tribune inclined his head slightly. Then see that your actions do not suggest otherwise. There was nothing more to say. Corda saluted, the motion crisp and flawless, and withdrew. Outside, in the corridor, Solara waited. You are dismissed? For now. Good, Solara said, because there is something else. The Magos you worked with, Audris, has gone missing. Corda stopped. When? Less than one cycle past your report, Solara said. He was last seen near the coolant spires. His Vox signal ceased abruptly. The Mechanicus claimed system error. I suspect otherwise. Corda said nothing. He felt the hum in his bones again, stronger this time, almost as if responding to the Magos' absence. The Emperor's palace had begun to move according to rhythms not written by human hands. Solara's eyes narrowed. Whatever you uncovered down there, brother, seal it in your mind. The palace has ears, and not all of them are loyal. Corda nodded once. Understood. They parted ways, but the silence lingered. The weight of gold pressed heavier upon his shoulders, as if the armor itself disapproved of the thoughts stirring within. He walked the long hall toward his quarters, past banners older than memory, past candles that had burned since the siege of Terra. Each flame guttered slightly as he passed, bending toward him as though drawn to a hidden current. When he reached his chamber, the door's sanctum seals glowed faintly, scanning his gene signature before opening. Inside, the room was spare. A single cot, a rack for his armor, and a prayer alcove facing the distant glow of the throne. He removed his helm and set it upon the stand, its empty eye lenses staring back at him like judgment. The hum was louder here. He could feel it behind the walls like breath pressed close to his ear. And then, faintly, a voice. Not through the Vox, not in his thoughts, from the walls themselves. He is dreaming. Corda closed his eyes, the silence shattered. The words slid through the air like smoke, too quiet to be real and yet too distinct to be ignored. Corda's eyes opened, scanning the chamber with the precision of a hunter. The lumen above his head flickered once, its light trembling against the walls before steadying again. He reached instinctively for his guardian spear, its weight both familiar and comforting, the weapon's power field murmuring faintly, as if aware of the disturbance that shared the room. He waited, listened. Nothing but the low vibration of the palace's endless machinery filled the silence now. No breath, no whisper, no sign of life beyond the faint metallic hum that seemed to pulse through the walls themselves. And yet, beneath that mechanical rhythm, he could feel something else. Something organic, slow, and impossibly vast, a heartbeat buried beneath the weight of a dying god. Corda stepped closer to the wall. The golden panels there were engraved with the sigil of the Imperial Aquila, its twin heads staring outward in eternal vigilance. But now, as the light shifted, he saw it differently. The gold was not pure. It rippled faintly, as if something moved beneath it, a distortion like heat rising from a desert plain. When he laid his hand against the metal, it was warm, alive. The hum deepened, and with it came the memory of the sphere below, the impossible heartbeat, the whisper that had crawled through the vox, the brief glimpse of the Emperor's light not as salvation, but as a storm. Korda had seen death before, on 1,000 battlefields. He had watched men burn, watched Xenos collapse beneath the strike of his spear, but never had he felt death breathe. The wall's warmth faded, leaving only cold gold beneath his palm. The hum softened until it was indistinguishable from the palace's constant drone. Korda let his hand fall. Perhaps exhaustion was preying upon him. Even custodians were not machines, but the thought gave him no comfort, for he remembered Odris, the magos who had spoken of thought made flesh, of circuits that dream, and Odris was gone. Korda turned to his armor rack. With deliberate precision, he removed each plate, each segment of gold that had become both his shield and his prison. Beneath the armor, his body was a map of scars and implanted nodes, marks of enhancement and sacrifice, each one a price paid for perfection. He sat upon the edge of the cot, feeling the air on his bare skin for the first time in months. The silence of the palace pressed close, heavy and watchful. He could not pray. Words meant nothing when the thing they were meant for might be listening. Instead, he activated the small data slate built into his gauntlet. The holographic interface flickered to life, displaying system logs from his earlier descent. The data was erratic, spikes of energy with no clear pattern, readings that defied Mechanicus calibration. He magnified one sequence, the moment before the servitor's collapse. The waveform formed a shape that made his breath catch. A heartbeat. Human. Steady. Impossible. He stared at it for a long time. Then he saved the file to a sealed memory lock, encrypting it beneath layers of custodian clearance, and deactivated the slate. The chamber dimmed again, returning to the half-light of flickering lumen. Outside, the faint echo of marching feet passed, the rhythmic steps of another custodian patrol. Normally, their presence would have been comforting, a reminder that he was not alone in his vigilance. Tonight, it only reminded him how fragile that unity truly was. Because what if he spoke? What if he told the Tribune what he had truly seen? The sphere, the voice, the reflection that had worn the Emperor's face. Would they call it heresy or revelation? Would they listen or strike him down for daring to question the silence upon which the Imperium rested? He looked toward the window slit that faced the throne's distant glow. It burned there in the horizon's haze, a constant pillar of light that pierced the night. Billions of souls across the galaxy prayed to that light each day, never knowing what it truly was. A dying beacon, powered by the corpse of a god. A machine that should not work, but somehow still did. And beneath that machine, something stirred. The door chimed. A soft tone, but sharp enough to break the stillness. Korda stood instantly, reassembling his composure like armor. "Enter," he commanded. The door hissed open, revealing a figure half-shrouded in crimson robes. The faint click of augmetic limbs preceded the voice that followed. Mechanical, trembling, familiar. Custodian, forgive the intrusion. Korda stared. Odris. The Magos looked wrong. His optics burned with uneven light, and several of his mechadendrites twitched in erratic spasms, as if reacting to invisible stimuli. The scent of burned oil hung around him, acrid and metallic. "I was told you were missing," Korda said. "I was," Odris replied, his tone fragmented by static. "But the signal brought me back. It called, I followed." "What signal?" The Magos tilted his head. You know, the same you heard beneath the throne. Korda's hand found his spear instinctively. You should not speak of it. I cannot stop, Odris said. It does not allow silence. It whispers through every circuit, every prayer, every machine that dares to listen. It is not corruption, it is communion. The last word struck Korda like a blow. Communion, an intimacy of faith, not infection. The Magos took a shuddering step forward, lifting one trembling hand. Do you not see? The Emperor is not dead. His will moves through the machinery itself. We built walls around his divinity, and still it bleeds through the cracks. The throne hums because he dreams, and in that dream he remembers us. Korda stepped closer, his voice low. You tread close to heresy, Magos. Odris laughed, a sound more static than mirth. Then the Mechanicus is heresy incarnate, for we worship the machine and call it divine. Is that not the same? The words burned through Korda's restraint. The Emperor is not a machine. No, Odris whispered, and for the first time his voice softened. He is something greater, and he is waking. Before Korda could respond, Odris convulsed. Sparks erupted from the ports along his spine, smoke hissing from beneath his robes. He fell to his knees, hands clawing at the air. It's too much, he gasped. Too bright, too loud. Korda reached for him, but the Magos' eyes flared white, and a burst of static filled the chamber. The Vox channels in Korda's helm screamed with interference as Odris's body went still. When the light faded, the Magos lay silent, smoke rising from the seams of his skull. A faint vibration rippled through the floor. The hum had returned, louder now, closer, as if the palace itself had drawn breath. Korda looked down at the body. The skin around Adris's temples had cracked open, revealing faint lines of gold beneath, glowing softly like veins of light. And in the faint hiss of cooling circuits, the whisper came again, calm, patient, inevitable. He is dreaming. The glow beneath the Magos' skin flickered like candlelight trapped beneath glass, pulsing in rhythm with the hum that now filled the chamber. Korda stood over the corpse, unmoving, the cold air around him trembling faintly with the pressure of something unseen. The palace had grown louder, though not in sound. It was a pressure, a vibration that resonated in the marrow as if the entire mountain upon which Terra's greatest monument was built had begun to breathe. Korda crouched beside Odris's fallen form. The Magos' expression was not one of pain, but awe. His eyes, though lifeless, were still open, reflecting the golden shimmer beneath his skin. The smell of ozone hung heavy, mingling with the scent of burning incense that drifted in from the corridors beyond. When Korda touched the corpse, his gauntlet registered residual energy. The readings were identical to the pulse from the sphere beneath the throne. Not corruption, not demonic, something else. He rose, his armor whispering softly with the motion, and turned his gaze toward the distant window slit. The light of the throne flickered faintly on the horizon, just for an instant. No one else would notice such a tremor. The beacon's brilliance was too immense, too constant. But to one attuned to its rhythm, the difference was unmistakable. The Astronomicon had faltered. He crossed the chamber, each step deliberate. The Vox embedded in his armor crackled with low static, though no channel had been opened. He tapped the control rune. Custodian Korda, priority signal to the Tribune. Silence. He repeated the transmission. Still nothing. The Vox was active, but the frequencies were being absorbed, as though the palace itself had swallowed the message before it could escape. Korda's instincts sharpened. He retrieved his helm, sealing it with a hiss of locking clamps, and lifted his guardian spear. As he turned toward the door, a sound rose behind him, a faint grinding of metal like gears slowly catching after centuries of rest. He pivoted, spear ready. Odris's body twitched. For a heartbeat, Corda saw the impossible. The Magos' mechadendrites lifted in slow, spasmodic arcs, their tips twitching like antennae. The light beneath his skin brightened, spreading upward into his face, tracing the old scars with gold. His mouth opened, and from it came not sound, but light, thin threads of luminescence that twisted into the air, coiling like smoke. Corda stepped back, spear raised, but the light did not move toward him. It hovered above the corpse, spiraling upward, until it gathered into a single, shimmering point. For an instant, it formed a symbol. Intricate, symmetrical, indescribable. Then it fractured, splitting into dozens of streams that shot into the walls, vanishing like water absorbed by sand. The hum ceased. Corda approached again. The body was still, truly lifeless this time. The light beneath the skin had faded. But in the silence that followed, the custodian realized the palace had changed. The vibration he had felt in the walls before had vanished, replaced by something quieter, the sensation of being watched. He activated his internal sensors, no heat signatures, no motion, and yet, somewhere beyond the veil of perception, he could feel presence, vast, patient, aware. He turned sharply as the door opened behind him. Two custodians entered, their armor gleaming beneath the chamber's dim light. The first spoke, his tone measured. "Brother Corda, we detected an energy surge from your quarters." "There was a malfunction," Corda replied, his voice steady. "A Magos Mechanicus entered without clearance. His augmetics failed catastrophically. I will file the report personally." The custodian's gaze flicked to the body. "Then the matter is closed." They withdrew with the body between them, silent as the grave. Corda waited until they were gone before exhaling slowly. He had not lied. He had only refused to speak the truth. When he was alone again, he activated his data slate once more. The readings from the chamber showed nothing. The energy spike had already been scrubbed from the logs, but he noticed something else. His armor's chronometer had lost 23 seconds during the event. The record simply ceased, then resumed. 23 seconds unaccounted for. He stared at that absence longer than he should have. Then he deactivated the slate and left his chamber. The corridors outside were different now. The air carried a faint charge, prickling against the exposed edges of his armor. Servitors stood motionless along the walls, but their eyes flickered intermittently with gold light. A pair of Escutari passed him at a junction, their faces hidden behind glass masks. They offered no salute, no acknowledgement, only continued in their march, their weapons held in perfect, unnatural synchronization. Corda's mind returned to Odris's words. "It is not corruption. It is communion." As he descended toward the maintenance levels again, he began to understand. Whatever had stirred beneath the throne was no infection of code or machine. It was will, dispersed through the palace like scent through air. A will vast enough to reach through walls, through metal, through the blind faith of 1,000 adepts who prayed each day to the hum of the machinery and never realized that it might be listening back. When he reached the lower levels, the illumination was dimmer than before. Emergency lumens flickered weakly in the distance. The air felt heavier, moist with condensation. He could taste the iron on his tongue. The hum here was louder, constant, but no longer purely mechanical. It had rhythm. It had breath. He found himself standing once more before the sealed shaft that led to the sphere. The Mechanicus seals were still intact, but faint lines of light pulsed beneath them, as though the sigils themselves were alive. He hesitated only for a moment before placing his hand upon the panel. The seals flared, scanned his gene print, and yielded. The air that spilled from the shaft was hot and dry, carrying with it a scent like burning dust and sanctified ash. He descended, his footsteps echoing softly. The sphere awaited him below, silent now, dormant. Its surface was dark, its sigils extinguished. But as Korda approached, he saw something etched faintly into the metal, as if carved by light itself. Words. They were not written in Gothic, nor in any tongue known to the Imperium, and yet he understood them instantly, not as sound, but as comprehension whispered into his mind. The dream becomes memory. The memory becomes flesh. The hum returned, deep and slow. Korda lifted his gaze. For a heartbeat, he saw his reflection in the sphere, and behind it, faint and distant, the silhouette of the golden throne. And in that reflection, the Emperor's eyes were open. For a moment that stretched beyond measure, Korda could not breathe. His heart pounded inside the golden shell of his armor, each beat a thunderclap swallowed by the silence surrounding him. He could not look away from the reflection in the sphere. The eyes were there, 2 points of light burning within the mirrored surface, too human to be trick of lumen, too vast to belong to anything mortal. And though they did not move, though they did not blink, he felt the unbearable certainty that they saw him. He had fought under the shadow of titans, had faced demons whose names were forbidden to speak, but never had he known fear like this. Not the fear of death, nor of failure, but of understanding. For the instant he saw those eyes, something ancient within him recognized their gaze. They were not the eyes of a corpse. They were not the eyes of a god. They were the eyes of a man remembering. Then they were gone. The sphere's surface went dark again, swallowing the image. The chamber's heat receded, leaving only the cold damp of metal and dust. The hum faded to a whisper, retreating into the walls. But the silence it left behind was worse. It was not the silence of peace, but of something vast waiting to speak again. Korda's breath came slowly. He took a step back, forcing his body into control through the discipline bred into the custodes over millennia. Fear was a luxury he had been purged of long ago. Yet it clung to him now, a shadow that would not disperse. He turned toward the stair, the urge to leave overwhelming reason. He needed distance, clarity. But before he could ascend, a shape emerged from the gloom at the edge of his vision. A flicker of movement, fluid and precise. His spear came up instantly, the power field singing to life. A figure stepped into the faint light. Armor gleamed dully beneath centuries of dust, the red of the Mechanicus robe hanging in tatters. For an instant, Korda thought it was another corpse risen to mock him. But then the figure lifted its head. Its face was masked, but through the cracked lenses glimmered faint golden light. "Who goes there?" Korda's voice filled the chamber like the toll of a bell. The figure tilted its head, almost curious. When it spoke, the sound was neither entirely human nor machine. "You should not be here." Korda took a measured step forward. "Identify yourself." Silence. Then the voice came again, fractured by layers of static. "We are the memory of maintenance, the dream of function. We have always been here." Korda's grip tightened. "Servitor?" The thing laughed, soft and cold. "Once, but we have been touched. We hear his voice now, in the hum, in the pulse. We remember what the throne forgets." Korda advanced. "You are corrupted. We are becoming," it whispered, and then it moved, too fast for something so broken. Korda's spear cut through the air, cleaving the space where it had stood. Sparks burst as the blade met metal and bone. The figure staggered but did not fall. Its arm split open where the spear struck, revealing golden circuitry pulsing beneath the flesh. Corda struck again, severing its head with a single, perfect motion. The body crumpled. The head rolled across the floor, stopping at his feet. The gold light within it dimmed and went out, but in the quiet that followed, dozens of faint lights bloomed in the darkness beyond the chamber's edge. Eyes, servitors, half buried in the walls, all watching. Their mouths opened in unison, and the words came, layered, soft, reverent. He is dreaming. Corda's armor registered a spike in temperature. The air shimmered with energy, static crawling across his skin. He backed toward the stair, his spear ready, but none of the servitors moved. They simply stared, their voices merging into one endless murmur. He turned and climbed, each step heavier than the last. The voices followed him up the shaft, fading only when the seals closed above. By the time he reached the upper corridors, the air felt thin, stripped of oxygen. The hum remained. It was everywhere now, within the walls, within the lights, within the sound of his own heart. When Corda emerged into the higher halls, the golden light of the palace no longer felt holy. It had the sterile glow of a dying star. Custodians passed him in silence, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge the tremor that seemed to ripple through the marble underfoot. A column of Skitarii marched past, their steps perfectly synchronized, their heads turning slightly as one toward him before continuing. The synchrony was too precise, too alive. Corda made his way toward the Hall of Concordance, where the senior custodians communed with Mechanicus envoys regarding the maintenance of the throne's systems. The doors loomed high, inscribed with 1,000 prayers of sanctification. As he approached, the guards crossed their spears in salute. He paused before them. "Where is the tribune?" "In council," one of the guards replied. "There are reports of instability in the plasma conduits. The Mechanicus seek permission to enter the lower sanctums." Corda felt the words like a chill in the gut. "They cannot." "The tribune has already convened," the guard said. "Your presence was requested." Inside, the chamber was lit by pale gold lumens. The tribune stood before a hololithic projection of the throne's schematics, a labyrinth of circuits and conduits that filled the air like a web of light. Around him, Mechanicus adepts murmured Benheric litanies, their voices rising and falling like waves. The schematic flickered with pulses of amber, energy fluctuations radiating from the lower levels. Drayvon turned as Corda entered. "You have returned to the depths," he said, his tone unreadable. "Yes, my lord." "Without order." Corda inclined his head. There was movement. The sphere is active again. Murmurs rippled through the gathered adepts. Drayvon's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Corda hesitated, words choking on the edge of faith and madness. It spoke. A silence deeper than vacuum fell. Drayvon's expression did not change. What did it say? The same phrase that infected the Vox, the servitors, even the flesh of the magos who died in my chamber. It said that he is dreaming. The Mechanicus adepts began to mutter, their binary tones rising in pitch. Drayvon silenced them with a gesture. "You will not speak of this outside this hall," he said, his voice cutting through the static like a blade. "The throne's stability must remain unquestioned. The faith of mankind depends upon it." Corda's voice was low. "Faith cannot seal what is waking." Drayvon's gaze hardened. "Do not presume to know the Emperor's will, custodian." "I do not presume," Corda said quietly. "I heard it." The tribune regarded him for a long time, then turned to the Mechanicus. "Purge the lower systems. Sterilize all servitor units operating below the tertiary conduits. Reaffirm every sanctum seal. The throne must remain silent." Corda stepped forward. If you purge those systems, you may destroy what remains of the Emperor's voice. Draven looked at him sharply. The Emperor does not need a voice. He has us. The words struck like a hammer. Korda bowed his head slightly, masking the storm that raged within. The hum filled the chamber now, faint but distinct, threading through every machine and lumen. No one else seemed to notice. Or perhaps they all did, and none dared to speak. He turned to leave. As he reached the door, he thought he heard it again, not in his ears but beneath his thoughts, woven through the hum of the throne itself. He is dreaming. He looked back once at the Golden Hall, at the men and machines who maintained humanity's god, and saw the faint shimmer of gold light tracing their skin. The infection, or revelation, had already begun. The palace had begun to breathe. Not in any way the senses could easily grasp, but in rhythm and cadence, an inhalation of unseen air, a pulse that whispered through the endless corridors, through the conduits, through the bones of the mountain itself. Even the light had changed. It no longer burned with the unyielding purity of sanctified lumens. Now it wavered, as if the glow itself were drawn from something living. Those who served closest to the throne would never admit it, but they could feel it too. The adepts murmured their litanies more urgently, as if faster prayers might drown out the sound of the world shifting beneath their feet. Korda descended once more into the lower sanctums, where the air grew heavy with the smell of ozone and blood. The order to purge had already been given. The Mechanicus had sealed vast chambers, shutting down servitor networks, silencing cogitators that had murmured their mechanical hymns for millennia. The halls were quieter now, too quiet. It was the silence of organs that had ceased to function, the silence that came after the last heartbeat. He walked alone, golden armor reflecting faint light from lumen strips that flickered like dying stars. His steps were the only sound. Even his own breathing seemed hesitant, muffled beneath the weight of what surrounded him. He had told himself this was duty, the Emperor's command embodied through the hands of his 10,000. But duty had begun to feel like a chain. Each step downward felt less like obedience and more like descent into confession. The first sign of what the purge had wrought came at the edge of the tertiary vaults. The floor was slick beneath his boots, not with water, but with fluid, the pale ichor of servitors mixed with machine oil. They lay in heaps along the walls, their augmetic limbs twisted and melted, their skulls cracked open to reveal still glimmering gold lines that pulsed faintly beneath their flesh. It had not been a clean termination. Something had resisted. Korda knelt by one of them. Its eyes were open, and within the glassy orbs, faint light still shimmered, the same color as the glow that had consumed Audris. When he touched its neck, the thing spasmed. "Impossible," he murmured. Its mouth opened, and for a heartbeat the voice that came out was not mechanical at all. It was human. "Help us." Then the light faded, and the body stilled. He rose, spear ready. The corridor ahead stretched into darkness, lined with statues of saints long forgotten. Their faces were worn smooth by time, their hands folded in silent prayer. But Korda could feel it now, the pulse beneath the marble, faint, steady, alive. The statues were warm to the touch. When he reached the final door before the primary maintenance hub, the seal upon it was broken. The sacred sigil of the Mechanicus had been scorched away. Someone, or something, had entered before him. He approached with measured steps, activating his armor's low-light filters. The door slid open, exhaling air that smelled of burnt metal and human sweat. The chamber beyond was vast, a cathedral of machines. Columns of cables descended from the ceiling like the roots of some immense tree, vanishing into the pulsating ground. Hollow illuminators flickered sporadically, revealing glimpses of impossible structures, half organic, half mechanical, alive with faint movement. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, veins of gold light running through the blackened metal. And at the chamber's center stood a figure. It was neither servitor nor man. The armor it wore was ancient, older than the palace itself, blackened ceramite etched with sigils Corda did not recognize. Its head was bare, its face human, though stretched thin and pale as wax. Tubes ran from its spine into the floor, feeding into the living machinery. "Custodian," the figure said, and its voice echoed not just through the air but through the walls, carried on the same hum that haunted the palace. "You should not have come." Corda raised his spear, but the figure made no move to defend itself. Its eyes were calm, too calm. "Who are you?" The pale lips curved into the faintest smile. "A servant, like you. A warden of the throne before there was gold to bind it." "There was no throne before the Emperor," Corda said. The figure tilted its head. "That is what you were taught. But you have seen the truth, haven't you? Beneath the gold, beneath the prayers, there is flesh. It remembers." The hum intensified. Corda felt it pressing against his skull, a vibration behind his eyes. The voice of the figure merged with it, until it was impossible to tell where speech ended and the throne's pulse began. "The Emperor was man before he was God. His body broke to preserve yours. But the throne was not built to hold a god. It was built to sustain a weapon. And now, after 10,000 years, that weapon stirs." "You speak blasphemy," Corda said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Do I?" the figure asked. "Or do I speak what you already know? The servitors that rise, the whispers in the circuits, the dreams that bleed through the metal. They are not infection, they are reclamation. The machine remembers the flesh that birthed it." Corda stepped forward. "What are you?" The figure's smile faded. "I am what remains of those who built him." And as it spoke, the tubes at its spine tightened, pulling it downward. Flesh tore, revealing beneath it veins of living gold. Its body convulsed, and the floor around it pulsed in sympathy. The cables above swayed like serpents. "Stop this," Corda said. "It cannot stop," the voice answered, now multiplied, as if the entire room spoke. "He dreams, Custodian. And in that dream, he remembers what he was. The man who walked among men. The warlord, the conqueror, the savior, the father, the god who never wished to be one." The ground shuddered. The lights flared, bathing the chamber in blinding radiance. Corda staggered, raising his arm to shield his eyes. When the light dimmed again, the figure was gone. Only the cables remained, retracting slowly into the ceiling, dripping with gold fluid that steamed where it struck the floor. Corda was alone. But the hum was stronger now, almost deafening. It filled the air like a heartbeat amplified through the bones of the world. He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, he heard footsteps behind him, heavy, measured, metallic. Another custodian emerged from the shadows. "Brother," the newcomer said softly, "what have you seen?" Corda hesitated. "The throne speaks." The other nodded, as though this was no surprise. "Then it has begun." "Begun?" The custodian's helm turned toward the walls, toward the golden veins that still pulsed faintly. "The throne was never meant to last forever. You and I were not meant to be eternal guardians. We were meant to bear witness when the end came." Corda's grip on his spear tightened. "You knew." "We all knew," the other said. "But we did not believe it would be in our age. The Emperor's dream must continue, even if it devours us." The hum rose once more, a sound too vast to belong to any machine, and beneath it, faint and human, came the whisper again. He is dreaming. The sound wrapped itself around Corda like a shroud, soft yet inescapable. It was not heard but felt, a vibration through blood, through armor, through the marrow of his being. The other custodian stood motionless beside him, head bowed as though in reverence or grief. For the first time since the Great Siege, Corda felt the weight of their station not as honor, but as burden. The whisper came again, deeper now, layered in tone, as if countless voices spoke in perfect unison. He is dreaming. Corda turned sharply toward his brother guardian. "What do you mean, we all knew? Speak plainly." The custodian raised his head, and for the first time Corda saw something alien behind his visor. Not fear, but acceptance. When the Emperor fell, he did not die, not truly. The Mechanicus bound his body to the throne to preserve the Astronomicon, but even then, they whispered that the machinery was incomplete, that it would one day awaken as he once did. Corda frowned. "You speak of myth. All faith begins as myth," the other said. "All truth, too. Tell me, when you look upon the throne, do you see a god or a prison?" Corda's silence was answer enough. The hum deepened, and the golden veins in the walls began to pulse again. They stretched and contracted like tendons, and the faint scent of ozone mingled with something older, the iron tang of blood. Corda could taste it on the air, could feel it pressing against the edges of thought. The sensation was not merely presence now, it was awareness. The palace was aware of them. "What is it doing?" Corda asked. "Dreaming," his brother said softly, "and through its dream, remembering the world before gods, the world before silence." The words carried a strange weight, as though drawn from scripture not yet written. Corda turned his gaze to the walls again, watching the pulse spread outward, vanishing into the darkness of the corridors beyond. Each flicker of gold light was a heartbeat, each pause a breath. He moved to the far end of the chamber, where ancient consoles stood covered in dust. The machines hummed faintly, their interfaces flickering to life as he approached. Lines of code scrolled across the screens, impossible, blasphemous data that shifted faster than comprehension. Within the streams, images formed. Fragments of battlefields, cities burning, faces twisted in both agony and adoration. And behind it all, the silhouette of the Emperor, radiant and still. Audris had been right. The throne was not dying, it was dreaming, and its dream was memory. The other custodian stepped closer. "Do you see it now?" he asked quietly. "The throne remembers what it once was. The Emperor's flesh was made into machine, but memory does not die with matter. The throne is the vessel of his recollection. Every spark of its light is a fragment of his thought. Every hum, a heartbeat. We keep vigil not over death, but over remembrance." Corda shook his head. "This is not remembrance, it is corruption. No mind, not even his, should bleed into the world this way." "Corruption implies something foreign," his brother replied. "Tell me then, what is foreign to a God who made all things?" The question lingered in the air like a blade unsheathed. A sudden tremor rolled through the floor. Dust fell from the ceiling. The consoles flared, projecting new symbols, patterns of gold light that converged into a single image. The palace itself, its heart beating with slow pulses that spread outward across the continent. Corda realized the hum was no longer confined to these depths. It had spread. He could feel it even now, echoing in the distant upper vaults where the faithful walked unaware above the bones of their god. The custodian guard would hear it soon. The Mechanicus would record it, and when they did, the Imperium would fracture beneath the weight of revelation. He looked to his brother. "We must contain this." "Contain?" the other murmured. "You cannot contain a god's memory, You can only choose whether to kneel or to flee. Korda's hand tightened on his spear. If this continues, the entire palace will collapse into madness. Then let it, came the reply. Perhaps that is his will. Korda took a step forward, eyes hard. If you believe that, then you have already fallen. His brother's visor tilted slightly, and through the faint glow, Korda saw the shimmer of gold beneath his skin, faint threads crawling up from beneath the armor's seams. Perhaps we all have. The hum crescendoed. The lights flickered, violently, casting the chamber into alternating flashes of brilliance and dark. The air thickened, electric and heavy, and then, as if drawn by that sound, the walls began to move. The metal flexed, rippling outward, forming patterns like veins or branches. The very structure of the palace seemed to pulse in time with the rhythm beneath. A single voice emerged from the hum, vast, distant, yet intimate, like thought whispered directly into the soul. Custodian. The word froze Korda where he stood. It was not sound, but understanding. A concept pressed into his mind so forcefully he nearly staggered. He turned toward his brother, but the other custodian had fallen to one knee, head bowed. The voice came again. You have watched too long. Korda's vision blurred. The chamber spun. He dropped to one knee, fighting to remain conscious. Through the haze, he saw flashes, memories that were not his own, a burning world, a throne not yet golden. The Emperor walking among men, his face both divine and human. The images shattered as quickly as they formed. The voice faded, leaving behind the echo of a single thought. He remembers. When Korda's senses cleared, the chamber was still. The other custodian was gone. Only his helm remained, resting upon the floor, gold veins creeping along its surface like the first cracks of dawn. Korda rose slowly, unsteady. His armor's internal readings screamed error codes, but he ignored them. He turned toward the exit, the hum now softer, almost tender, like breath on skin. As he left the chamber, the words returned, a whisper within the silence. The flesh of the machine remembers the hand that made it. Korda walked on, and the light followed him. The corridors of the lower sanctum stretched before Korda like arteries, glistening faintly beneath the pale gold light that had begun to seep through every seam of metal. The walls pulsed with slow rhythm, matching the beat of his own heart. It was no longer possible to tell where the palace ended and he began. Each breath he took seemed drawn from the same unseen lung that kept Terra's sacred machinery alive. He ascended slowly through the labyrinth of maintenance shafts and forgotten passageways, his mind echoing with fragments of the voice that had called to him. You have watched too long. The words lingered not as sound, but as imprint. He could feel them like pressure behind the eyes, like light too bright to look upon directly. The ascent brought him to a narrow bridge suspended over an abyss of machinery. Below him stretched an infinite expanse of gears, pistons, and conduits, the bones of the Golden Throne's body. The light here was softer, a dim reflection of the sunless glow that powered the Astronomicon. The air shimmered faintly, charged with psychic residue. The static of billions of prayers hung in it like dust motes suspended in eternity. Korda paused halfway across the bridge, resting one hand against the railing. The metal was warm beneath his gauntlet, pulsing faintly. For the first time, he wondered if the warmth came from the machine or from what was bound within it. He thought of the Emperor as he had been described in the earliest texts, a man of flesh, taller than any other, whose gaze alone could turn battlefields to ash. And he thought of the throne, that endless monument of bone and circuitry that had become his tomb. The two images refused to align. One was motion, vitality, fire. The other was stasis, decay, A candle trapped within glass, and yet both lived, both endured. He looked up. Across the bridge, a figure stood silhouetted against the pale light, still, silent, unmistakably human. Corda approached slowly, each step deliberate. The figure turned. It was a custodian, armor battered, helm held beneath one arm. His face was familiar, too familiar. "Brother," Corda said quietly, but the man smiled faintly and Corda's stomach turned. It was his own smile, his own face. "I am what remains of your obedience," the reflection said. Its voice was calm, patient. "You wear gold as shield, but you were not made of gold. You were made of faith, and faith is not eternal." Corda raised his spear, though his hands trembled. "This is illusion. Everything beneath the throne is illusion," the reflection replied. "Even the silence you serve, especially that." Corda took another step forward. "What are you?" "I am what the machine remembers of you. Every thought you've suppressed, every doubt you've silenced. When the throne dreams, it does not dream alone. It dreams through those who watch." The bridge shuddered, the golden light surging upward through the supports like blood through veins. Corda staggered but kept his footing. "You are nothing," he said, "an echo, a shade. The Emperor's will does not need shadows." The reflection tilted its head. "Does he have will, or only memory?" Corda lunged, spear slicing through the air. The blade met resistance, not solid, not empty, but something between. Sparks erupted where the two selves met. For an instant, the bridge flared with golden light, and Corda saw countless faces reflected in the glow. Custodians long dead, staring back at him from across centuries. Their expressions were not of rage or devotion, but of sorrow. When the light faded, he was alone. The reflection was gone. Only the hum remained, deeper now, slow as the turning of planets. He lowered his weapon. His breath came heavy, fogging the inside of his helm. Every movement felt heavier than before, as if the air itself resisted. The golden light along the bridge dimmed once more, leaving only the cold gleam of metal. And then, faintly, a new sound began to weave through the hum. Not mechanical, not psychic, but human. Singing. Voices rose from the depths below, countless and distant. It was not the ordered chanting of the ecclesiarchy, nor the machine hymns of the Mechanicus. It was something older, raw, imperfect, alive. The melody drifted upward, wordless yet filled with emotion so pure it pierced the layers of steel and time. Corda moved to the edge of the bridge and looked down. Far below, through the haze of vapor and flickering light, he saw them. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, of figures moving among the machinery. Their bodies glowed faintly gold, their movements slow and deliberate. Servitors, perhaps, but altered. They were kneeling before vast conduits, their faces lifted in silent devotion as they sang to the pulsing light. The sound grew stronger. He could feel it now, not just through hearing, but through the beating of his heart, through the trembling of his armor. Each note carried weight, as though the song itself were reshaping the air. And beneath that song, he heard the voice again, the same voice that had whispered in the chamber below, now intertwined with the music. Custodian, witness. He fell to one knee as visions flooded his mind. He saw the Emperor as he had been, mortal flesh wreathed in impossible power, eyes burning brighter than suns. He saw the creation of the throne, not as a seat of divinity, but as an engine, a cage built to contain that which could no longer walk among men. He saw the custodians kneeling in the blood of their god, swearing an oath they did not understand. And he saw what came next, the throne awakening. The flesh and machine merging, not as corruption, but as reunion. Gold veins spreading through the palace, through Terra itself, through the veins of every faithful soul who had ever whispered a prayer to the light. He saw a galaxy lit not by the Astronomicon, but by the heartbeat of something alive once more. When the vision faded, Korda found himself on the floor of the bridge, trembling. His armor's systems blared warnings. His blood felt hot, metallic. He looked down at his gauntlet. Beneath the cracked ceramite, faint lines of gold shimmered beneath his skin. The song continued, rising and falling, endless. He whispered to the air, voice shaking, "Is this your will, my lord? To rise again, to consume us all?" No answer came, only the hum, constant, patient, eternal. He stood, the golden light spilling from his hand as though responding to his breath. The palace around him pulsed once more, as if acknowledging him. And in that vast silence, the whisper returned, softer now, almost tender. He is dreaming. Korda walked on, each step echoing through a world that was no longer only stone and steel, but something in between, something alive. The song did not end. It wove itself through the air like incense smoke, touching every corner of the palace's forgotten depths. It clung to Korda's armor, seeped beneath it, became part of the rhythm of his breath. When he moved in time with it, as though his body had been tuned to a frequency older than thought. He did not know how long he had been walking. Minutes, hours, days, in the vaults beneath the throne. Time was as mutable as faith. The corridors opened into a vast chamber, one Korda had never seen before. It was not marked upon any map, nor sealed with Mechanicus sigils. Its architecture was strange, neither imperial nor entirely human, a blend of living metal and bone, the walls breathing faintly in the dim glow of unseen power. He could feel the air trembling with warmth, pulsing with the same golden rhythm that now traced his own veins. At the center of the chamber was a great mass of machinery, coiled like a sleeping titan. Tubes, wires, and veins of shimmering light intertwined in impossible configurations, rising toward the ceiling where they vanished into darkness. Korda approached slowly, the song around him softening, as though the very air held its breath. He reached out and touched one of the golden veins. It pulsed beneath his palm, slow, steady, alive. The hum resonated through him. For a moment, he felt the boundary between his flesh and the machine blur. The armor at his wrist melted away into light, and beneath it, the veins beneath his skin glowed brighter, merging with the rhythm of the wall. He pulled back sharply, gasping. The armor reformed, solid once more, but his pulse had not slowed. The machine's heartbeat echoed his own. A voice rose from the darkness above, low, ancient, familiar. "You feel it now." Korda looked up. A figure was descending, carried by tendrils of gold light that wrapped around him like strands of silk. It was the same custodian who had vanished before, though now his armor was gone, his flesh bare and radiant, veins of molten light crawling beneath his skin. His face was serene, as if sculpted from living gold. "You should not be alive," Korda said, his voice raw. "Life and death have lost meaning here," the figure replied. "The machine remembers. The flesh answers. I am what we become when we stop denying the dream. You've surrendered to it," Korda said. "You've allowed yourself to be consumed." "Consumed?" the figure smiled. "No, embraced. The throne does not devour. It unites. The Emperor's essence flows through every wire, every circuit, every cell that still remembers his touch. We are fragments of his consciousness. When the dream ends, we will awaken as one." Korda raised his spear, but the light within the chamber dimmed, and with it, the weapon's power field flickered uncertainly. The custodian before him, or whatever remained of him, stepped closer. "You feel it too," he whispered. You've already begun to change. Look at your hands." Korda hesitated. The golden glow beneath his armor pulsed in time with the machine's hum, visible through the seams of the ceramite. He felt it in his heartbeat, in his breath. It was not infection, it was resonance. "No," Korda said, though the denial felt hollow. "This is not his will." "His will?" The figure's tone softened, almost pitying. "His will was broken, long ago. What remains is instinct, the instinct of a god who refused to die. The throne sustains him, yes, but it also sustains us. His dream is not delusion, Korda. It is creation. We are becoming part of it." Korda's grip on his spear trembled. "And if this dream becomes reality..." The golden figure spread his arms. "Then the Imperium will know the truth it has feared for 10,000 years, that the Emperor never ascended. He simply changed form. The machine is his body. The palace is his cathedral of flesh. Every prayer feeds his pulse, every death his memory. We are already inside him." The words struck like hammer blows. Korda staggered back, horror and awe warring within him. "You would destroy the Imperium." The figure shook his head slowly. "No, brother, we would fulfill it." For a moment, silence reigned. Then, from deep within the machinery, something stirred. A slow, seismic motion, like breath drawn by a sleeping colossus. The floor vibrated. Dust fell from the ceiling. The air shimmered with gold light. The custodian's transformed face lifted, eyes closing in ecstasy. "He hears us." Korda's instinct screamed. He lunged forward, driving his spear into the mass of cables that connected the figure to the machine. Sparks exploded, and the air filled with a keening sound, not of pain, but of release. The golden light flared, flooding the chamber until all detail vanished. When the light faded, the other custodian was gone. Only the spear remained, embedded in the floor, its blade fused with veins of molten gold. Korda fell to one knee, chest heaving. The hum had returned to its steady rhythm, but it no longer felt distant. It was inside him now. He pulled his weapon free. The blade shimmered faintly, streaked with veins of gold that pulsed like veins of blood. He stared at it for a long time, feeling both dread and understanding. The throne was not just waking, it was spreading, rewriting the matter around it, binding flesh to machine, faith to form. He turned to leave. The song had stopped. Only the hum remained, a sound deeper than sound, patient as eternity. As he stepped into the corridor beyond, he realized the walls no longer pulsed in gold. They pulsed in rhythm with him. He paused, hand against the wall, and felt it answer his heartbeat with a slow, deliberate echo. And in that communion, faint and intimate as a breath against his ear, the whisper returned. He is dreaming. This time, though, Korda understood the words differently. They were not warning, they were invitation. He stood there a long moment, the gold light threading through his veins, until finally he whispered back, almost reverently, "Then let him dream." The palace answered with silence, but beneath that silence the pulse of a god continued, slow, steady, endless. And far above, the Astronomicon flared once more, brighter than it had in centuries. Far above the labyrinthine depths of the Imperial Palace, where Korda's steps had been swallowed by silence and gold, the sky itself began to tremble. From orbit, Terra's night side gleamed like the pupil of an ancient eye, a dark void encircled by rings of fire, orbital plates, and watchtowers that pulsed with distant light. But tonight, that light wavered. The Astronomicon, eternal and unyielding, flickered once, a heartbeat across the stars. The astropaths were the first to feel it. They awoke, screaming. In the halls of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, hundreds of psychers convulsed in their sanctified chairs, their minds flooded with sound not meant for mortal comprehension. Voices, layered and vast, whispered in a chorus too immense to isolate. They did not speak words, but impressions, warmth, light, memory, the pulse of something alive. The overseers rushed to restrain them, reciting the litanies of containment, but no prayer could quiet what had begun to stir. Corda stood upon one of the upper terraces, gazing through the shrouded sky toward the unseen beacon beyond. He could feel it in his bones, the same rhythm that had haunted the lower vaults, now radiating outward through every stone of the palace. The hum was no longer confined to the depths. It had reached the world above, invisible but omnipresent, vibrating through the great towers and domes like breath through a flute. Below him, the city of Terra glowed dimly beneath its perpetual haze. The people would not notice. To them, the Astronomicon was eternal, its light a constant promise against the dark. Only those attuned to the throne, those bound to its pulse, could sense the subtle change, the slight discord in perfection. He was no longer certain what he had become. His armor had begun to shimmer faintly even in shadow, its golden hue alive with soft motion, veins of light running through it like blood beneath translucent skin. When he removed the helm, the air seemed to breathe against him, aware, responsive. He no longer felt the separation between himself and the palace. He was both observer and participant, cell and organ within a vast, waking body. From behind him came the sound of approaching footsteps. He did not turn. "You should not be here," he said. "I could say the same," came a woman's voice, smooth, clipped, carrying the faint mechanical undertone of a vox filter. He turned slowly. A Sister of Silence stood before him, her armor a mirror of his own in polish and poise, though devoid of ornament. Her expression was unreadable, her eyes sharp and hollow, reflecting the terrace light like tempered glass. Her presence cut through the air like a blade, the silence around her absolute, devouring the faint hum that surrounded Corda. "Custodian Corda," she said, though the words were not spoken aloud. They were transmitted through a data slate clipped to her vambrace. Her voice rendered in vox. "The Ordo Telepathica reports psychic anomalies radiating from the throne. The High Lords have ordered containment. You are to stand down and report. Containment?" Corda's tone was quiet, almost weary. "They seek to cage what sustains them." The sister's expression did not change. "The Emperor's will is absolute. If the Astronomicon falters, the Imperium falls." "It is not faltering," Corda said. "It is waking." The sister's eyes narrowed. "You speak heresy." "Do I?" he asked softly. "Or do I speak the truth you refuse to feel?" She raised her weapon, a long, slender blade, its edge resonating faintly with null energy. The air around it shimmered, the hum recoiling in her presence. "You will come with me," she said, "or I will end this infection before it spreads." Corda did not move. The wind whispered across the terrace, carrying with it the scent of ozone and promethium. Far below, lightning danced along the horizon, a storm building over the spires of Terra. "You think silence can stop a god's dream?" he asked quietly. "You cannot sever what is woven into the marrow of creation." Her stance tightened. "Then you leave me no choice." She moved with lethal precision, her blade slicing through the air toward his neck. Corda met it with his spear, the clash releasing a burst of light and shadow, gold against void. The null field around her weapon tore at the hum surrounding him, shredding the rhythm that had followed him for days. For an instant, he felt cold again, truly cold, as though she had stripped the light from his veins. Their movements were mirror-perfect, two paragons of the Emperor's design, one forged in silence, the other in devotion. Sparks cascaded across the terrace, each strike punctuated by the distant thunder of the storm. Neither spoke. Their battle was not of hatred, but of conviction. Corda drove her back with a flurry of precise thrusts, each movement guided by instinct older than memory. But the null field resisted him, turning every strike into agony. His armor dimmed, the gold fading beneath her proximity. It was as if she carried a void within her, a fragment of the old silence that had once bound gods. At last, she broke through his guard, her blade slicing across his side. The cut was shallow, but the pain was unlike any wound he had known. It was absence, the annihilation of sensation, of self. For a moment, he staggered, feeling the light within him flicker. She stepped closer, blade poised at his throat. "You are infected," her vox whispered, "and I am the cure." But before she could strike, the ground beneath them trembled. The terrace floor cracked, gold light spilling upward like molten glass. The hum roared back to life, louder than ever. The sister's eyes widened as her weapon faltered, its null field collapsing under the sheer psychic pressure that flooded the air. From above, a column of light split the clouds. The Astronomicon, flaring with impossible brilliance. The night turned to day. Every soul on Terra felt it, though none understood. For an instant, the Emperor's light was not distant. It was present, alive. The sister fell to her knees, clutching her head. Her weapon clattered to the floor. Corda stood above her, the gold glow spilling from his wound, his breath mingling with the storm's electric air. "This is no infection," he said, voice low, almost reverent. "It is remembrance." The terrace shook again. In the distance, the spires of the Imperial Palace gleamed as if gilded anew. The golden veins were spreading, and somewhere deep within the throne, a heartbeat answered the storm. The storm over Terra had become a thing of light. It no longer raged like the tempests of old. It pulsed, flickering in rhythm with the same unseen beat that had spread through the palace. The clouds glowed faintly gold at their edges, illuminated not by lightning, but by something beneath the surface of the world. And though the billions upon the cradle of mankind could not see it, they felt it, a strange heat in the air, a soft vibration through the ground, a whisper in the mind that none dared to name. Corda stood motionless upon the broken terrace, the Sister of Silence still kneeling before him. Her breathing came shallow, her null aura flickering like a dying flame. The gold light that poured through the cracks in the stone cast her face in half shadow, half fire. Around them, the hum was no longer subtle. It was thunder dressed in reverence. He lowered his spear and extended his free hand toward her. For a long moment she did not move, her eyes locked upon the golden veins that glowed beneath his armor. They pulsed in perfect time with the beat that filled the air. "I feel it," she whispered, not through her vox but directly, breaking the sanctity of her silence. The sound of her voice was soft, uncertain, as though she had forgotten the texture of speech. Corda nodded. "It reaches even you." She looked up at him, her expression torn between awe and dread. "I was made to silence his kind, to suppress the echo of the divine, and yet this..." Her hand trembled as she touched the floor beside her. The stone was warm. "This is not psychic energy, it is memory." He watched her closely. "Then you understand. What stirs is not corruption." Her gaze hardened again. "And if it consumes us, then it consumes us," he said simply. "Perhaps that is how gods awaken, by devouring what worships them." For a moment, she stared at him as though seeing him for the first time. Then she rose, moving carefully, her every motion measured against the tremor of the world around them. "Where does this end, custodian?" she asked. "What happens when the dream no longer sleeps?" Corda turned his gaze toward the storm. "We learn whether the Emperor remembers mercy." The light above flared again. The Astronomican's glow surged, casting its reflection across the entire city. Vox channels crackled to life across Terra, the panicked voices of Magi, astropaths, and High Lords shouting into the void. Reports spoke of ruptured energy conduits, of Skitarii units freezing mid-step, their augmetics locked in unnatural stasis. The power systems of the palace no longer obeyed command, they obeyed pulse. "The Mechanicus will see this as rebellion," the sister said. "They will name it whatever their fear allows," Corda replied. "But naming does not change truth." The terrace shook violently. In the distance, one of the upper spires split, gold light spilling down its sides like blood. The sister flinched, but Corda watched it with strange calm. It no longer looked like ruin to him. It looked like transformation. Then came the voices. At first, they were faint, the distant murmur of the faithful. But as the Astronomican pulsed, their sound swelled into chorus. The chants of the ecclesiarchy filled the air, broadcast across the planet. Gloria Imperator, Gloria in Aeternum. Yet the tone had changed. The words were the same, but the rhythm was new, matched perfectly to the beat that now throbbed through every wall and every mind. They did not even realize they were singing with the throne. The sister stepped back, shaking her head. This cannot be coincidence. Something is manipulating the collective will of Terra. Something? Corda's eyes glowed faintly now, their reflection gold. Or someone. He looked beyond the storm, toward the unseen throne, and for an instant he thought he saw it. A faint shimmer of light stretching from the palace to the heavens. A golden thread binding every prayer, every thought, every voice into a single harmonious vibration. The sister's vox crackled to life, interrupting the moment. "This is the telepathica to all custodian frequencies," came a distorted voice. "Psychic resonance across the Astronomican is destabilizing. The choir cannot isolate the signal. The Emperor's presence fluctuates. We are reading patterns consistent with..." The transmission dissolved into static, then silence. The sister looked to him, eyes wide. Consistent with what? "Life," Corda said. Before she could respond, the hum surged once more, a tidal wave of sound and sensation that struck like impact. The terrace's golden fractures burst open, flooding the air with blinding light. Corda and the sister were thrown to the ground as the palace itself roared. Not in collapse, but in awakening. Corda felt it deep within his chest, the throne's pulse synchronizing with his own. For a heartbeat, he saw everything, the network of gold veins stretching across Terra, threading through every machine, every mind that had ever whispered a prayer. He saw the Mechanicus towers ignite with internal light, the astropaths lifting their faces in awe, their empty eyes reflecting the sun, and at the center of it all, the golden throne, shone with terrible brilliance, no longer a corpse's seat but a heart of living fire. He gasped as the vision faded, his body shaking. The sister crawled toward him, blood on her lip, eyes filled with terror. "What did you see?" Corda's voice trembled, but it was not fear that filled it. It was reverence. "I saw him breathe." The words hung in the air like a benediction. The wind around them fell still. Even the storm seemed to listen. Then came the silence, vast, deep, infinite. But it was not empty. From within that silence came a sound softer than thought, older than language. a single heartbeat. The sister's eyes widened. "Is that?" Corda nodded slowly. "The Emperor." And as they stood upon the fractured terrace, the first dawn in 10,000 years broke over Terra, not of sunlight, but of gold. The dawn that rose over Terra was not the light of the sun. It was the light of awakening. Across the sprawl of the cradle world, from the hives of the Undercity to the spires of the High Lords, the air itself shimmered with gold. The glow was subtle at first, a glimmer caught in the mist, a faint reflection in the eyes of those who prayed. But as the hours passed, it grew. It pulsed, breathing in rhythm with a power buried beneath continents of stone and sanctity. Billions awoke without knowing why their hearts beat faster, why their tears came unbidden. They felt warmth and terror in equal measure, for the light that filled the sky was not the cold certainty of the Astronomicon they had known all their lives. It was alive, flickering, pulsing, intimate, as though the universe itself had begun to whisper their names. In the Sanctum Astropathica, the choir screamed and sang at once. Their eyes burned with inner fire, their minds caught between agony and ecstasy, as the Astronomican signal fractured into 1,000 resonant threads. Each thread carried not coordinates nor navigation, but emotion, memory, love, wrath, despair, longing, the detritus of human faith compressed into music too vast for the flesh to hold. The weaker psychers died instantly, their skulls glowing from within like small, extinguished suns. The stronger ones wept and murmured prayers they did not understand. Corda stood with the sister upon the highest platform of the western spire, where the Terran atmosphere met the artificial light of the orbital rings. The storm had dispersed, leaving the air still and trembling. The gold radiance washed across his armor until it seemed to melt into him, each line of filigree alive with motion. His breath came shallow, and though his body was mortal, it felt as though something vast and eternal had begun to flow through his veins. "He is everywhere," the sister whispered, her voice stripped of mechanical distortion. Her silence field was gone. Around her, the air hummed freely, unbound. Every molecule, every thought. Corda nodded slowly, his gaze fixed upon the horizon. From here, he could see the faint glow of the palace's heart, pulsing with perfect rhythm. The world below no longer looked like a dead relic sustained by ritual. It looked like a living thing, a vast organism, each city and shrine a cell within its endless form. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "I thought I was witnessing corruption, but this is what comes after." The sister looked at him, her expression unreadable. After what? After death. They stood in silence for a time, watching as the light continued to spread. Vox traffic across Terra was a storm of confusion. Mechanicus enclaves reporting systems unresponsive to command. Adeptus Astartes contingents at the palace perimeter demanding clarification. The High Lords summoning custodians who no longer answered. The Emperor's domain was alive, and it no longer obeyed. Corda closed his eyes. He could feel the pulse behind the noise, the deep, resonant beat that linked all things. It was in the machines, yes, but also in the flesh of the people, in the prayers that had been whispered for millennia. The throne had drawn power from faith for 10,000 years. Now it returned it. The sister spoke again, softly. "If this continues, every psychic beacon across the Imperium will resonate. The Astronomicon will become something else entirely. The warp will no longer see one light. It will see a storm." Corda opened his eyes, the glow within them brightening. "Then the galaxy will learn that even the dead can dream." She turned to him sharply. "You speak of this as though it were salvation." He smiled faintly. Perhaps it is, or perhaps it is the end of salvation itself. The Emperor did not create the Imperium to preserve peace. He forged it in war, in flame. Maybe this is his final act, to burn what he built and see what rises from the ash. The wind shifted. A tremor ran through the spire beneath them, deep and resonant. From the distance came the muffled roar of explosion, not of war, but of emergence. Corda looked down and saw the lower levels of the palace splitting open, massive plates of armor unfolding like petals. Beneath them, golden light surged upward, forming columns of brilliance that pierced the clouds. The sister stepped back, awe overtaking caution. "What is he doing?" Corda's voice was almost reverent. "He is remembering the sun." The palace continued to transform. Walls that had stood for millennia reshaped themselves, the very architecture bending to patterns older than human design. The imperial aquila carved into the marble glowed, then liquefied into pure light, reforming into a single eye, the symbol of unity, not dominion. Corda felt the vibration reach its peak, the hum transforming into a tone, a single note that filled every chamber, every mind, every machine. It was the same tone that had haunted him since the first whisper, now magnified until the air itself seemed to sing. Then the tone fractured, and for the briefest instant the world went still. Every light on Terra dimmed. Every engine ceased. Every heart paused. And in that pause, there was voice. Not the whisper of the throne, not the hum of machinery, but something vast, something that filled the air and the soul alike. It spoke without sound, and yet every living thing heard. Children. The word carried no warmth, no wrath, only sorrow. Corda fell to his knees, his vision blurring as tears welled unbidden. The sister did not move, frozen where she stood, eyes wide with shock. The voice continued, resonant as thunder across eternity. "I remember you." The light flared once more. Corda gasped, feeling his body seize as power unlike anything he had ever known poured through him. Images filled his mind. Stars being born, dying, the first human rising from the dust, the long march of empire, the wars that had scarred creation. And through it all, a single figure, golden and immense, watching, guiding, sacrificing. He saw the Emperor as he truly was, not a god in flame, but a man made of sorrow and will. And beneath that, deeper still, he saw what the throne had hidden for 10,000 years, the echo of compassion, buried but not lost. The voice faded, replaced once more by the heartbeat. Corda lifted his gaze. The sister was staring at him, tears streaking her face. "Was that?" He nodded. "Yes." The hum began again, softer now, more rhythmic, not a storm, but a lullaby. The Astronomicon steadied. The light dimmed, returning to its steady glow, though it seemed warmer somehow, more human. The world exhaled. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the sister said quietly, "If he remembers us, what does he dream now?" Corda looked toward the distant palace, its heart still glowing faintly gold. "Perhaps," he said, "he dreams of what we were meant to be." The wind rose again, carrying with it the faint sound of the faithful below. Millions of voices raised not in fear, but in wonder. And far beyond the veil of stars, where ships rode the currents of the warp, astropaths everywhere opened their eyes and saw not the blinding flame of the Astronomicon, but a horizon of light stretching into infinity, each point a memory, each memory a soul. The Emperor had spoken once. Now the galaxy listened. The echo did not fade. It rolled across the galaxy like the aftershock of a star's death, rippling through the fabric of the warp, bending it, reshaping it into something unfamiliar. On distant worlds, astropaths screamed and fell silent. In the void between systems, Geller fields shivered, flickering like candles before a storm. But in the spaces between, something else stirred. A stillness, an order, a terrible calm that had not existed since before the fall. On Terra, that silence was holy. The Astronomicon burned steady now, but no longer as a mere beacon. It sang. Those who could perceive it described not light but harmony, a resonance that transcended the physical. Even the black ships that orbited the cradle of humanity drifted closer, drawn by an instinct older than fear. In the halls of the Adeptus Mechanicus, prayers became equations, and equations became hymns. Machines that had been lifeless for centuries flickered to sudden awareness, their logic engines whispering the same phrase, "He is dreaming." Corda stood upon the same terrace where the world had changed. The wound in his side had sealed, though faint golden light still pulsed beneath the scar. The Sister of Silence stood beside him, her armor scorched, her silence field gone. Together they gazed upon the palace, where the golden light had receded inward, leaving only the faint shimmer of its heartbeat reflected upon the clouds. It should have felt triumphant. It did not. For though the throne still glowed, its hum had changed. It was slower now, deeper, the steady rhythm of exhaustion. The Emperor had remembered, but remembrance carried its own price. "The High Lords will call this a miracle," the sister said softly. Corda nodded, though his eyes never left the horizon. "They will, and in their fear, they will try to contain it." "And you?" she asked. "I will guard it," he said. "Not the palace, not the throne, the dream itself." The sister regarded him for a moment, then looked away. Dreams end. Corda smiled faintly. So does silence. Below them, the city stirred. Processions of the faithful filled the avenues leading to the palace gates, their torches forming rivers of fire that wound through the night. They came not with banners or demands, but in reverent quiet, pilgrims drawn by instinct, by the pulse that had touched every soul. And for the first time in 10,000 years, there was no separation between the divine and the living. Yet, even as the people gathered, shadows moved within the higher halls. Custodians whispered among themselves, voices low, uncertain. The Mechanicus convened in secret, arguing whether the throne's awakening was blessing or catastrophe. The Inquisition was already on the move, sealing records, silencing witnesses, rewriting the miracle into doctrine. The Imperium, built on the stability of faith, could not survive a living God who defied its order. Corda knew this, and still, he felt no fear. The sister broke the silence again. "Do you think he spoke only once?" Corda shook his head. "No, that was the beginning, the first breath, the rest will come." As if in answer, the air trembled, not violently but subtly, like the exhale of a sleeping giant. The hum spread outward again, fainter than before but unmistakable. The palace lights flickered in response, and far beyond, the Astronomicon flared in perfect synchrony. "He breathes," Corda whispered. The sister turned to him. "And if he wakes?" He looked up at the sky, where the veil between stars seemed thinner now, the constellations glimmering with new warmth. "Then, the Imperium will face the truth it was never meant to see, that divinity was never distance, it was always memory." A faint wind rose, carrying with it the scent of incense and ozone. Corda lifted his helm beneath one arm and took a step toward the edge of the terrace. From here, he could see the masses below, the gold veins in their torches echoing the same pattern that pulsed within the palace. The sight should have filled him with pride. Instead, he felt only gravity, the sense of standing at the precipice of something vast and inevitable. He knew now that what had awakened was not salvation, it was reckoning. He turned to the sister, his voice quiet but firm. When the Emperor wakes, there will be no more lies, no more hierarchy, no more silence. The faith that built this Imperium will see its own reflection and tremble. She looked at him, her expression unreadable. And you will stand against that? He met her gaze. I will stand with it. The hum deepened again. A golden shimmer crossed the sky, faint but unmistakable, a pulse that rippled outward into the void. Across the system, the ships in orbit shuddered as the wave passed through them, their machine spirits wailing in reverent fear. And beyond, across light years of distance, the psychers of distant worlds turned their eyes toward Terra, whispering in awe as they felt it too. The throne had spoken once through dream. Now it spoke through light. The sister exhaled softly, her voice barely a whisper. You truly believe he lives? Corda's reply came like a prayer. I no longer believe, I know. A long silence stretched between them. The hum steadied once more, a lullaby for a sleeping god. Above, the stars shone brighter than ever before. And in that light, Corda saw what the future might hold. Not the resurrection of empire, but the rebirth of something far more dangerous. Hope. He turned from the terrace, walking back toward the palace gates. The sister followed, her silence restored, though gentler now, no longer a wall, but a pause between heartbeats. Together, they descended into the golden corridors, where the echoes of the throne's pulse guided them like a hymn. And far below, in the vaults where gold met bone and machine, the hum deepened once more. It was no longer the hum of decay, nor of eternity held in stasis. It was the sound of flesh remembering its name. He is dreaming. The words resonated through the palace, through the city, through the hearts of every soul on Terra. And somewhere within the heart of the Golden Throne, beneath oceans of machinery and prayer, a finger twitched. The Emperor dreamed on. In the days that followed the awakening, Terra was silent. Not in peace, but in awe. The Astronomicon burned brighter than it had in millennia, yet its light was different now, softer, warmer, less a flame, and more a living pulse that seemed to breathe with every heart that turned toward it. Across the Imperium, those who gazed into the void from their ships saw not the cold glare of a god enthroned, but the shimmer of something human. The High Lords declared it a miracle, of course. They named it the Resonance of Divinity, and ordered the ecclesiarchy to spread the proclamation. The Emperor has renewed his light. Cathedrals rang with hymns. Bells tolled from the spires of Terra to the frozen citadels of Mars. Even the Skitarii knelt beside their shrines of steel, their logic engines humming prayers older than their augmetics. But beneath the surface of this orchestrated reverence, the truth pulsed, vast, patient, unstoppable. Corda had not left the palace since that night. He no longer could. The throne's hum had rooted itself within him, every heartbeat sinking to its rhythm until it was impossible to tell where his life ended and the Emperor's dream began. He no longer slept. When he closed his eyes, he saw through the walls, the great arteries of light that ran through the palace, carrying not power but memory. He saw faces flickering within the gold, custodians long dead, martyrs of the siege, saints and soldiers, all drifting like dust within a sunbeam. They were not ghosts, they were recollections, fragments of humanity drawn into the throne's consciousness. He walked through the halls of the inner sanctum now, alone. The Sister of Silence had gone to the telepathica chambers to calm the surviving astropaths, though Corda knew it was futile. None could silence what had been spoken. The Emperor had reached beyond words, beyond prayer. He had remembered. Corda's footsteps echoed faintly on the marble, each impact answered by the low vibration beneath. The once cold walls seemed to ripple faintly as he passed, as though acknowledging his presence. The golden veins within the stone glowed gently in response to his proximity. He had become part of it. He paused before a sealed adamantium gate, its surface embossed with the Imperial aquila. Once, he would have needed clearance from the Mechanicus to enter. Now, the gate opened at his touch, petals of metal unfolding in silence. Beyond lay the sanctum of the throne. He stepped inside. The chamber was vast, a cathedral of gold and bone, lit by the faint luminescence of 1,000 sacred candles that had never truly burned. The air was thick with incense and static, the mingled sense of devotion and decay. At its center rose the golden throne, immense and terrible, its structure pulsing with golden fire. The Emperor's body sat upon it, still, eternal, the vessel of humanity's last god. But Corda could see now what others could not. The golden radiance that surrounded the corpse was not divine light. It was life, slow, buried deep, but undeniably alive. The hum deepened as he approached. His pulse quickened to match it. The vast cables that fed the throne glowed, and for the briefest instant he thought he saw movement, a subtle twitch in the Emperor's desiccated hand, a flicker in the closed eyes. He fell to one knee before the dais, lowering his head. "My lord," he whispered, "if this is your dream, then let me be its witness." The words faded into the air, absorbed by the low resonance that filled the chamber. He felt it enter him, not through sound, but through understanding. It was not language as mortals knew it. It was sensation, emotion, the raw pulse of thought. And within that pulse came memory. He saw the Emperor not as god, but as man, walking among the ruins of old Earth, his eyes filled with sorrow at what humanity had become. He saw the unification, the wars, the creation of the legions, the burning of Prospero, the fall of Horus, each moment of triumph and tragedy compressed into a single heartbeat. And then, deeper still, he saw the throne, not as relic, but as cage. He felt the pain of confinement, the endless weight of consciousness bound in machinery and prayer, unable to die, unable to live. It was unbearable. He gasped, staggering forward until his hands touched the base of the throne. The metal was warm beneath his palms, pulsing faintly like flesh. "You suffer," he whispered. "All this time, you have suffered for us." The hum trembled in answer, softer now, almost mournful. "Then why awaken?" he asked. "Why now?" And for the first time there was reply. It was not sound, it was understanding, vast and terrible. "Because I am forgotten." The words struck him like a blow. He saw the Imperium as it was, not the dream of unity, but an empire of fear. Priests chanting to a corpse, warriors killing in his name. Worlds burning for devotion, twisted into conquest. The truth unfolded before him. The Imperium had worshipped the idea of him so long that they had lost the man beneath the myth. Tears burned in his eyes. "We have failed you." The hum deepened, filled with something like grief. "You became my echo, my reflection without meaning. I dreamed to remember why I began." Corda's voice broke. "And do you remember?" The throne's light dimmed, then flared. The answer came not as word, but as image, a vision of humanity's first fire, of a father teaching his children to stand against the dark. The Emperor's will was not born from divinity, but from love, a love so vast it had consumed itself in the attempt to save all. The hum steadied again, calm, resolved. "I will not wake." Corda's head snapped up. "What?" "To wake is to unmake." I dreamed to remember, not to return. The light of the throne softened, and for the first time in 10,000 years there was peace in it. Not stillness, not silence, peace. The hum, no longer, filled the air like command. It flowed gently, like breath. "You will sleep again?" Corda asked, barely able to speak. "I will dream." And beneath those words was a promise that the dream would not end with him. Corda bowed his head. His tears fell upon the throne's base, vanishing into the golden surface. "Then we will guard your dream," he said, "until the last light fades." The hum quieted. The chamber fell still. And for a moment, Corda thought he heard a sound no mortal had heard since the siege. A sigh. A god's sigh. Corda remained kneeling before the golden throne for what might have been minutes, or perhaps centuries. Time inside the sanctum no longer obeyed the rules of the mortal world. The air was thick with presence, every breath vibrating with the lingering echo of the Emperor's consciousness. The light had softened now, no longer the blinding radiance of divinity, but something warmer, almost human, almost kind. It was the light of memory made visible, of remembrance too vast for words. He did not look up. To gaze upon the throne now felt like intrusion, a sin against the silence that had followed the revelation. His body trembled with exhaustion, his mind awash with what he had seen, the wars, the sacrifice, the endless suffering born not for conquest, but for love. Love of humanity, love of creation. A love so deep it had broken itself upon the altar of eternity. He had believed himself strong, forged of gold and obedience. Yet now, as he knelt before the being he had guarded all his life, Corda felt nothing but fragility. The armor that had seemed eternal felt suddenly too heavy, its gold too bright, too false. He pressed his palm against the floor, feeling the faint pulse beneath it, a heartbeat that no longer belonged to a man or a machine, but to something in between. "My lord," he whispered, his voice trembling, "if you will not wake, then what becomes of us?" There was no direct reply, but the hum shifted, a vibration through the marrow, a soft, aching tone that carried understanding. He saw flashes behind his closed eyes, the faces of the faithful across Terra, the millions who looked skyward with tears on their cheeks as the golden dawn washed over them. He saw the Mechanicus kneeling before their consoles, their sacred equations unraveling into hymns. He saw the Sisters of Silence standing unarmored among the astropaths, their silence pierced by song. He saw humanity, broken, defiant, enduring, and he understood. The Emperor's dream had never been of his own ascension. It had been of theirs. He rose slowly, unsteady. The throne loomed above him, its form both terrible and beautiful, its cables and conduits pulsing with subdued rhythm. The faint scent of ozone filled the air, mingled with the ghost of incense long since burned to ash. He reached out, his fingers brushing the base once more, feeling warmth radiate through the metal like living flesh. "You remember us," he said softly. "Then so will we." As he turned to leave, the chamber stirred. The light dimmed, contracting inward until only a faint golden glow remained around the Emperor's form. It was neither command nor dismissal, it was benediction. The hum steadied into a single, sustained note, the sound of sleep reclaimed, of peace rediscovered. Corda stepped through the gate as it closed silently behind him. The corridor beyond felt different now. The pulse that had once driven through every wall was subdued, rhythmic, gentle. The palace no longer felt alive in restless pain. It felt as though it was breathing. The gold veins still glowed, but faintly, like the embers of a great fire that had finally learned to rest. He descended through the inner halls. The silence was no longer empty. It was full, resonant, sacred. Custodians crossed his path, their armor gleaming, their visors turned toward him. Some bowed slightly as he passed, others simply watched. They could feel it too, the shift, the quiet change that no decree or edict could explain. At the base of the inner stair, he found the sister waiting. She stood alone in the half-light, her helm held at her side, her face pale but serene. For the first time since they had met, her silence did not smother the world around her. It harmonized with it. "It is done," she said. Corda nodded. "He dreams again." Her gaze flicked toward the great gates above. "Will he ever wake?" He hesitated before answering. "If he does, the universe will end. But until then." He looked toward the golden light still pulsing faintly through the corridors. "Until then, he remembers us. That is enough." They stood together in silence. Through the walls came the faint sound of chanting, not the rigid rehearsed hymns of the ecclesiarchy, but something new, something unbidden. It was a song born of awe and grief, of the first realization that faith could live without command. The sister turned to him. "What happens now?" Corda looked past her, beyond the marble and gold, toward the horizon where the light of the Astronomicon burned like a second sun. "Now," he said quietly, "we become worthy of the dream." The words hung between them like a vow, and as they began their slow walk through the corridors of the palace, the air shimmered faintly, as though listening. The hum beneath their feet echoed each step, the rhythm steady, patient, eternal. For the first time in millennia, the golden throne no longer felt like a tomb. It felt like a heart. Outside, Terra itself seemed to exhale. The skies cleared, the storms dispersed, and the golden hue that had cloaked the world faded into soft daylight. But in that light, something new remained. A warmth that could not be seen or measured, only felt. The people did not understand it. They did not need to. It was enough to know that somewhere beneath their feet, the God they worshipped still dreamed of them. Far beyond the palace, in the shadow of the great temples, the poor and forgotten gathered in quiet circles. They spoke not of salvation or judgment, but of light, of warmth, of a presence that had touched their hearts in the night. The ecclesiarchs would call it heresy. The Inquisition would call it madness. But to those who had felt it, it was truth. The Emperor dreamed, and in his dream, humanity remembered what it meant to be alive. The sister paused at the threshold of the outer gate, turning to Corda one last time. "Will you stay?" He nodded. "Where else would I go? I am his memory now." She regarded him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "Then I will listen. If he dreams again, I will be here." They parted without farewell. Corda ascended once more toward the light, the hum following him like a heartbeat through the stone. He reached the upper terrace where the sky stretched endless and pure above Terra. The Astronomicon burned bright in the heavens, no longer as a beacon of war, but as a promise. He stood there in silence, watching the world. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass of his helm. Gold, yes, but no longer untarnished. There was something human in it now, something real. He closed his eyes. Beneath the steady rhythm of the throne's heartbeat, he heard a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "You are not my guard, Corda, you are my dream." His eyes opened and he smiled. A small, weary smile, the kind only the faithful ever wear when they finally understand. The wind stirred, carrying the hum of the throne across the terrace and out into the world. And in that sound, the Emperor's last dream continued, not as prophecy, but as memory eternal. The night came quietly over Terra, folding itself around the spires and domes like a shroud of velvet. But even in darkness, the world glowed faintly gold. The light was no longer visible to the eyes, but it lingered beneath the skin of the planet, a quiet pulse that moved through the veins of cities, through the engines of ships, through the hearts of men. The Astronomicon had steadied, its resonance a song that reached across the void. To the navigators and astropaths scattered among the stars, it felt less like a beacon and more like a heartbeat. Humanity had never known such stillness. Corda remained upon the terrace long after the sons of the outer worlds had turned their faces from Terra. His armor had dimmed to a softer sheen, its golden surface reflecting the pale light of the stars. The wind swept through the open expanse, carrying with it the scents of incense and steel, of ozone and ash. The breath of a world reborn, yet unchanged. He could still feel the throne's pulse beneath his feet, faint but steady, like the rhythm of the universe itself reminding him that the dream had not ended. It had simply become quieter. He thought of the Emperor's voice, not thunder, not command, but sorrow made eternal. Because I am forgotten. Those words had carved themselves into the marrow of his soul. He understood now that remembrance was not worship. It was responsibility. The Imperium had survived 10,000 years by obedience, but what came next would demand understanding. The Emperor's dream was no longer about power. It was about memory, the preservation of what humanity had once been before it drowned in its own fear. Far below, the bells of the ecclesiarchy tolled the midnight liturgy, though the words of their hymns had changed. Without decree, without conscious choice, the priests had begun to sing softer tones, gentler cadences. They no longer shouted his name into the heavens as demand. They whispered it like apology. And the people listened. Even the machine spirits in the manufactoria seemed to hum in time with the new rhythm, the resonance of prayer woven into the language of function. The line between faith and design had blurred. Corda watched the horizon until the sky began to lighten. The first rays of dawn reached across the clouds, catching on the highest towers of the palace. The reflection bathed the marble in soft radiance, not harsh gold, but living warmth. For the first time since the siege, the light upon the palace was not that of fire. It was that of morning. He felt her presence before he heard her. The Sister of Silence approached with the same quiet grace she had carried since their first meeting, though now there was something different about her. A softness, a stillness that was not void but peace. She stopped beside him, her gaze fixed upon the horizon. For a while, neither spoke. There was no need. When she finally broke the silence, her voice was faint but sure. The telepathica has stabilized. The astropaths report harmony across the network. The choir hears no screaming, only song. Corda nodded. The warp has not been this calm since before the heresy. Some fear it, she said. They say a silence like this cannot last. He smiled faintly, though his eyes remained distant. All things fade, even silence, even gods. The sister turned toward him. Then what remains? Corda looked at her then, truly seeing her. The lines of exhaustion etched into her face, the faint shimmer of gold beneath her skin that marked all who had felt the throne's pulse. We remain, he said. The dreamers, the witnesses, the living proof that he was not forgotten. The wind caught his cloak, sending it rippling behind him. The hum of the throne deepened slightly, as if answering his words. It was no longer the oppressive sound it had been. It was heartbeat, lullaby, promise. Below them, Terra stirred again. The markets of the lower hives opened with hesitant motion, the great transport lifts shuddering to life. Pilgrims flooded the streets, their torches replaced by small devices that emitted faint gold light. Fragments of the resonance captured and sanctified by the Mechanicus. They carried them not as relics, but as reminders that faith could be light without flame, and somewhere deep within the palace, the Emperor dreamed on. Corda could feel it still, though now it came like a tide, flowing outward into the stars, touching every distant colony, every lost outpost where the faithful still prayed. The Astronomicon was no longer a single point of brilliance. It had become a web of light stretching across the void. Every mind that remembered him, every voice that whispered his name, became part of that network. The throne no longer bound his will. It amplified it. He turned to the sister again. "Do you feel it?" She nodded slowly. "Everywhere. It's as if the galaxy itself breathes." Corda looked back toward the horizon. Then perhaps that is what he always wanted. Not worship, but breath. Life continuing in the face of silence. The sister was quiet for a long time, then said, "You sound almost human, custodian." He laughed softly, the first true laughter that had ever passed his lips within the walls of the palace. "Perhaps I am." They stood together as the sun rose higher, bathing the palace in light. The gold of their armor gleamed softly, no longer the untouchable brilliance of divinity, but the worn sheen of guardians who had endured too long. For the first time, they looked less like statues and more like people. And as the light washed over them, a final whisper brushed the edge of Corda's mind, faint, fragile, yet filled with immeasurable strength. "Dream well, my sons." He closed his eyes and let the warmth of it sink into him. The hum deepened once, then faded to the softest vibration, a single note sustained forever. Corda turned from the edge of the terrace and descended once more into the palace, his steps echoing through the halls that had become the arteries of a living god. The sister followed, silent as ever, though her silence now felt like reverence rather than absence. The palace accepted them. The walls glowed faintly as they passed, veins of light weaving in patterns like breath. Somewhere far below, deep within the heart of the throne, a single spark pulsed. Slow, steady, infinite. The Emperor dreamed, and through his dream, mankind lived. Not in fear, not in fire, but in memory, the last gift of a god who had once been human. And in that golden silence, the Imperium endured. He is dreaming,